Scream 7 brings Sidney back to the franchise as her daughter is the latest target of the Ghostface killer.
Scream 7 basically takes place a couple years after the ending of Scream 6, but, this film is not without its, controversy and drama surrounding it. Obviously, Scream 6 shifted the focus more towards Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega's characters. It seems like it was shifting away from the Sidney Prescott angle of all of it. A lot of drama surrounding the last film and going into this film, especially with the firing of Melissa Barrera. Jenna Ortega walks. The original director that was going to direct this film also stepped down, and it basically forced them to go back and rewrite this entire movie of what it was going to be versus what it ultimately became. And you can kind of see that in how this movie progressed. But I do want to say kind of off the bat here that Scream's never really been a critics type of movie. It's always been a movie for like horror fans and fans of specifically of like slasher films and things like that. And you can see a lot of fan service of that in this film, because this film definitely had like some pretty brutal Ghostface stuff, and there was a lot of time spent around Ghostface here where I feel like the Ghostface character was a lot more prominent in this film than it had been in several of the others, because we do spend a lot of time with Ghostface on our screen and being very much a real threat throughout a good chunk of this movie.
Yeah, and you always get the Scream franchise as kind of aware of itself and of horror films, of all the different tropes that happen. Of course, going all the way back to the first Scream of "I'll be right back" and all those lines, and just kind of being a little tongue-in-cheek to like, because it has its own in-universe Stab movies, which is the Scream movies but called Stab, and yeah, it's always been kind of on that fringe of that. You either love it or kind of hate it. It's never been a critical darling. I love the Scream franchise, but I was very mixed on this one. As you mentioned, there was so much controversy behind, because even like Neve Campbell was supposed to be in Scream 6, and they weren't willing to pay her what she thought she deserved, so she walked away. So they had to kind of rewrite Scream 6 a bit to exclude her. And then because of everything that happened with Melissa and Jenna and all that, we're not going to get into the politics and everything of it, that they had to completely rewrite Scream 7 for a new direction and gave her a big payday to bring her back. So it's just like, studio-wise, they fumbled it a little bit with these last two. Like, you set up with Scream 6 to potentially, have a new angle that's still connected to the, original story and stuff, and then you do all that, and then you just have to kind of go back to, all right, let's just have Sidney be the star again. And, it picks up a few years later. She has a daughter. She's back in California with her husband. She's a teenager dealing with teenage stuff, but her mom doesn't want to talk to her, doesn't really want to go into her past and stuff, and that causes a rift and a problem between them two. And that's played out throughout the film. In a way, it's good, but it also kind of just doesn't do much when it comes to that story. Like, you get the angst and stuff between them, but you get a very small resolution to Sidney. Like, I feel like after 30 years... and 6 out of the 7 films with Sidney, that there hasn't really been a progression. Like, what are you really doing with her story? It kind of just felt like you only went back to her because that's the only option you had after all the controversy and stuff that happened.
Well, sure. You're focusing more on a Sidney-focused plot as well, and she's kind of been positioned now as this Ghostface killer, right? Like, she's and by Ghostface killer, I mean she's not the actual Ghostface, but she's the killer of the Ghostfaces, right? Like, she's, had a dozen people after her now throughout the 6 films that she's been in over the course of the years. But like, it's definitely interesting to see how they kind of came back to this character and brought the younger daughter into it, because a lot of the focus is like, she was the same age that Sidney was in the original Scream, and to kind of bring it full circle with this familial trauma that seems to permeate in her life. Like, she's constantly being attacked by people trying to be the Ghostface killer. All of them have different motives, and we could talk about the reveal a little bit at the end if we want to as well, like, which is probably, in my opinion, the weakest part of the film. And it's the one that a lot of people have issues with, because the motivations felt very meh. Like, once you kind of break it down and look at, what their motivations actually were, one of the two made sense, but the other one was just kind of like, it felt like you threw a second person in there because you had to have two and not one Ghostface killers, you know what I mean? Because it's so rare to have just one. I think maybe Scream 3 was the only one to have one, or Scream 4. I don't remember which one had just the one killer, but it's super rare. I believe it was Scream 3 or 4. But you see this woman who's gone through so much in her life. She's lost several people. She's constantly being hunted by deranged people who are just obsessed with her. And, it makes me wonder how many times they could continue to go to that well without it just being like, okay, well, at what point does it become too convoluted, right? Does it become, how many other people are coming out of the woodwork? And you have some new people that are introduced in this film. Obviously, you have McKenna Grace, who feels like she's just collecting the infinity gauntlet of different types of roles because she's in so many different things, and this is her second project with Matthew Lillard, and then she's doing the Scooby-Doo movie, which is another Matthew Lillard project. But this one tries to be a little bit more modern with the use of like AI and deep fakes and some other things that they're trying to bring into the franchise to kind of spice it up a little bit. And there's some of that that's done very effectively. I thought the AI deep fake stuff was solid for the story. You know what I mean? I thought that was all done well. I like the kills.
It had some brutal kills.
Always has some really brutal kills. Like Scream is always known for some kind of like, you can't go quite like Terrifier level with gore, but they do a pretty good job of making very intense kills in these movies, and this film was definitely not short on that.
Yeah, but at the same time, it had some stuff that I couldn't like help but laugh at. Like, there's multiple situations where guns are pulled on the Ghostface killer, and Ghostface historically has only ever had a knife, and they have a knife and they're waving it at him, and they're like, "Okay, I'm gonna put my gun down." Like, have a gun. Right. Why are you in 3 seconds putting your gun down and kicking it away to someone holding a knife? Like, it's always had absurdities with stuff. And I would even say this one almost more than the others went a little more ludicrous and ridiculous with how people can survive the Ghostface killer, the amount of stabs and everything else they take, hours and hours and hours before that you learn that they survive it. And it's like, no, they would have bled out before that happened. Like, it felt like it went a little over the top in that way. But yeah, I do agree that the deep fakes and the AI, because if you haven't seen the trailers or paid attention much to it, the killers do use AI and deep fakes to try to bring characters back from the past to torment and taunt Sidney with it. But the biggest failure I feel this movie had with that was, as you mentioned, the final reveal of the killers really felt like they had no connection or no real anything to the film. Like, they really don't have anything to Sidney. Like, there's barely a connection with one, as you mentioned. But even at that, it's like, it just felt like you threw in 2 random people who were doing all this stuff, and it didn't really, because it's always had some sort of connection to the people who are being killed. Like, there's somebody, either the mom of one of the boys who were killed before, some sort of relation to either Sidney's a kid brother, or someone involved, but these two had no real relation to her or anyone really at all. And that's what it really just, like, you don't exactly go into these for the plot, you go in for the kills and everything else, but it's a franchise that spanned 30 years that's trying to have an interconnected type of universe. And then you kind of go a little bit lame with who the final killers were. It just, that part was just like, and again, the ending of ridiculous, over the top, how many attacks that someone can take before they finally fall down dead was insanely over the top. It was fun, but it was just so over the top.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Ghostface in particular is like OP to the point of, like, you always joke that you can shoot him in the body as many times as you want, but you got to shoot him in the head kind of thing. And it's just like, okay, we get it. And they kind of lean heavier into that in this one too, because the Ghostfaces take a pretty brutal amount of attack on their end as well. And
even they're all still human.
I do got to say, though, I want to give this movie some grace a little bit, because I do feel even up until the end, like, it was a solid movie. Like, I was enjoying myself. Like, despite the fact that, you have absurd ways of surviving. Like, that's kind of what Scream has always been.
As I say, yeah, it's been that way a little bit, but it did feel like it went a little more than they have.
As you get a little further along, you got to up the ante a little bit, you know what I mean? But I really do feel up until kind of the lackluster reveal at the end that it was a solid movie. Like, you had a lot more dread of trying to escape these killers that felt a little more almost barbaric in their methods here, where it was, I think, more terrifying in their actions here, because you had, just the stalker, like, you see them stalking more, you see them tracking more, you see them being a little more ruthless in their killings even. Like, the two that I would poke at the most would probably be the school scene, like the school theater scene, with the one kill in particular that was kind of brutal, and then the scene at the bar, like in the restaurant with the bar area, that was intense too, and there was some kind of terrifying elements in that, and that's one thing I think they've always done a very good job of.
The kills have been.
The kills have always been good, and the kills were top notch in this movie too. Like, I know it kind of feels like we're kind of poo-pooing on the movie overall as a whole, and I think the lackluster ending notwithstanding, I think the rest of the movie is pretty solid. Like, I had a good time up until the reveal at the end, and then it was just like, I get it, and if we want to go into spoilers for that, we can, but I think the rest of the movie was still pretty solid. Like, I wound up enjoying myself, you know what I mean? Like, you have to kind of take it a little further for it to have any kind of impact, and I think they tried to do that, and I think for the most part they were successful at that. It's just, I didn't care for that ending.
Yeah, it fell apart for me at the TV station.
Sure.
So when Sidney leaves a TV station, because, slight spoilers, her daughter is being chased by the Ghostface killer at this point. So she goes out to her car, and she doesn't have her car keys. So instead of going back into the studio, because she had to drive there, so her keys are somewhere in the studio, grabbing her keys real quick and getting in the car and leaving, she decides she's going to run across. It's going to save time to run across town. Yeah. And then she has to pivot and run across town even further. And that just got like, okay, so instead of just going and finding your keys real quick and coming back out, or you have another person inside, multiple people inside who have vehicles with keys, you could have gone in and taken their vehicle. But no, you're going to run. You get it. It's supposed to be a small town. But she's going to run completely across town while trying to call and help her daughter out. And so that's when it started getting like, all right, now we're getting into the ludicrous stuff, that it's going really over the top.
Final girl has infinite stamina.
Yeah, infinite stamina, like everything like that. That's when it really started kind of falling apart to me. And then you get the reveals of people you thought were dead who are still alive. And then you get the killer reveals and you get all the stuff. And all of it just felt like, Like you had a good build up in the beginning, as I agree, other than, of course, with being a final girl, 30 years of people chasing her, trying to kill her. She's answering every single unknown number, FaceTiming unknown numbers, just talking to anybody and everybody, even though like her business has security cameras and codes, her home has security cameras and codes. She doesn't trust anybody with her daughter, but she's going to answer every unknown caller. Like, it has that stuff that you just have to try to turn your brain off to, or it's going to bug you because, again, Scream's never been about the solid, great writing and dialogue and story and stuff, just enough of it to have fun with it and be there for the kills. But it was disappointing after her sitting out of Scream 6 because of a financial dispute and bringing her back after all the controversy, that it kind of felt like, this was a movie you kind of rushed rewriting to get it out because you couldn't do what you wanted to do before.
Sure, and I think this film has very clear indications of that. Like, it was, you could definitely tell they spent a good amount of time and money rewriting the script, and it felt a little messy at times, which it does. But still, I think given the circumstances and time involved, we still got a pretty solid movie out of it. Like, we really did. Like, I think there's a ton of fan service if you are a fan of the Scream films. I think you get a ton of fan service in this movie, and I think they did a good job of tying all those elements in and making it feel like a proper Scream movie, given that, we can kind of talk about it a little bit here, but Scream 7 was going in a very different direction before all of these rewrites. And, you hear about the rumors of, I guess the writers have come out and the people that were going to be involved in the original version of the film, where it was going to be more of a turn for Melissa Barrera's character, who's been kind of toying with, being diving into the fact that she is Billy Loomis's daughter and, leaning more into those things. And supposedly Jenna Ortega was going to get killed at the opening act of the film and she was going to turn bad because of it and all this other stuff, which could have made for an interesting dynamic. And it's a shame that we'll never get that version of the film, but I think taking those real life circumstances and turning it into the film we got, I think they did a fine job of pivoting to a Sidney-focused story, and who knows what that's going to mean for the future of the franchise, as we know now with the movie being out that the movie's doing very well commercially. I believe opening night when we went and saw it had the highest grossing first night for the film in franchise history. So controversy notwithstanding, people are going to see these movies still. It's going to be the number one movie this weekend at the box office.
It looks like it's going to have the overall best box office opening for a Scream film.
So, it's still doing gangbusters at the box office. So if people are still turning out to see it, we're going to get another one. And it feels like they may be making Scream 8 sooner rather than later. So we may not get that long of a wait in between movies, but I mean, it kind of is what it's going to be. People are still tuning in to watch it. It's getting a lot of hate from the Melissa Barrera camp, from people that were really interested in that story. And it's getting review bombed. And that's what makes it so difficult for a movie like this, that people go into these things with so many preconceived notions about a story, or I'm going to automatically hate this movie because of X, Y, and Z. And I hate that for movies, because you kind of just need to take them on face value as what they are. And that's what we try to do. We're very aware of all the controversy around the film, and we still try to go into it with an open mind. And I think that it's really hard for a lot of people to let that go. And you see that it's by far the worst rated movie. If you look at aggregate scores and Rotten Tomatoes, which you really shouldn't pay that much attention or let it influence your going to see or not going to see a film because of that. If you want to go see it, but you have those things that can negatively impact it, but it doesn't appear that it's negatively impacting it that much because it's doing very, very well.
I will give it credit for one thing that I did enjoy was of course, they're famous for the cold openings of the first kill and everything in the beginning. And I feel like this one was great because it takes you with a couple who's going to an Airbnb that happens to be the original house from Scream 1, and it's been done up with history and animatronic dolls, and it's a museum for it that you can stay in. And I thought that was fun. Ridiculous kills in it as well that you expect to have right out of the gate, but it was a fun way to open it. I do have a little bit more, as I said, I love the original. I would say I love the original 2. 3 was okay, and then they tried to semi-restart it with 4 and 5. Both of them tried different ways to kind of restart and reboot things, but I don't know. It did feel that it had a lot of issues to me of just, I said, it had a lot of good parts to it, but it did fall apart heavy in that ending, and it's got me, I wish they could have ended a lot better, and I would have felt a lot better about this movie if they would have had a better ending and just not as many of the corny type of, Sidney has a full house. She has a safe room and she has security system at the wazoo, but the killer has been hiding inside the house, and you can get that kind of stuff, but it goes in kind of ludicrous stuff the police keep on disappearing every time, and they can't catch up to a woman on foot who's running to find something when they're supposed to get that. There's some stuff that it was hard for me to turn my brain off of too, because they were just going kind of, it just felt a little lazy in a way that they're just we don't know what to do here, so let's just throw logic out the window. Yeah,
I think there's a little bit of laziness in there, because one of the things that I wanted to nitpick about the film is her husband, played by Joel McHale, by the way, who's just awesome. I love Joel McHale as an actor, and he's the chief of police, but there is so little police presence in the back half of the film that it's laughable a little bit. You're if something were directly involved the chief of police's family, that place would be crawling with cops, but that's not conducive to a good horror movie. Yep. So they have to disappear in this small town where all of these police officers supposedly are non-existent at the back half of the movie. But I get it. You have to suspend some disbelief in a situation like this, but it's just okay, I personally I think the ending of the film would have hit a little bit harder had they dove into the connections that the two killers actually had to Sidney in the situation, right? Because the second killer, I felt, had no connection to Sidney whatsoever.
Yep.
None. Like, I get where they tried to have them connect to the second killer to the first killer, who wound up having the issues with Sidney that they had. And I won't spoil their motivations here, but I get what their motivations were. I just wish they would have dove into the relationship between Sidney and the first killer, who winds up being the last one standing at the end, the last Ghostface that is part of like the big Sidney fight at the end, where I get the motivation. I just wish they would have done a little bit of a better job of connecting it throughout the film. Because one thing Scream typically does a decent job of is knowing you could. It's very rare that it surprises you with who the killers are, given everything goes on. Like,
because they always make everybody a suspect,
of course,
so
and that's kind of the meta. That's kind of the meta part of it. But everyone around them, you have a logical reason of why they could be the killer, right? And this one, it was just like, it almost felt like they were intentionally diverting your expectations to almost literally anyone else in the movie. And it was just like, oh, it was really them this whole time because of X, Y, and Z. And you're just like, you could have connected that a little better. And that's where I feel like it fails at the end of the film for that reason, is you're just like, I get it, but we had no indication that that was even a possible motivation for them at any point throughout this entire movie.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it was a big miss on their end, was connecting it to have an actual impact at the end. Because I got to the end and it was just like, I get it, but okay.
That connection was very, very loose.
Very, very. And it was just like, okay, that wasn't the... I feel like they could have written that a little bit better, and I wonder if that was a victim, but a victim of the circumstances of the movie. But it was just like, that should have been a heavier focus on getting to that point and having it have that impact and that gut punch, because that's what you want from a killer at the end, where you're just like, oh, I get it. Because even like the killers in 6 had the connection to 5. Mm-hmm. Like, you had that previous connection where that was very much missing in this one. And I think that's my biggest complaint here, is like, you just don't do a good enough job of connecting it to literally everything that's come before it. And like I said, I understand why, because they do a fine enough job when they get to there of like, this is why I'm into this, because of X, Y, and Z. Like I said, we're not going to spoil that, but it was so poorly connected throughout the film that you just didn't care. I personally just didn't care about it by the end, and it was just like kind of an underwhelming reveal to me.
Yeah, and it left zero impact of the AI deepfake stuff they were doing too, because that was all just kind of nostalgia baiting in it. Like, but that could have been a really interesting plot point if someone who was one of those killers actually had a connection to any of the people they showed from the past or Sidney. But like, there was, that connection was like,
it was very weak.
If you lined up 100 people that had anything to do with Sidney, you pick the very last person that could possibly have any connection or impact with her. And so, yeah, it felt just so weak and such a like, okay, well, where are we actually at the end of this story? We're kind of still at where we were without this movie even existing, because Sidney is still closed off. She opens up to her daughter a little bit throughout the film, but it's still a very much guarded, protected, standoffish Sidney throughout. And it just like, you could have progressed her a little bit more too, with her story and her opening and finding what is the ending of her story going to be. It's been 30 years. Nev Campbell's now 52. She's not that old, but you got to be thinking of a franchise that's been going on that long. It's just, is she going to be like the Jamie Lee Curtis that just keeps on appearing and disappearing throughout the franchise until they decide what they want to do with her? Could they potentially move into an area where they end up making her snap and she becomes a Ghostface killer in another one or something? Because, as you mentioned, they look to be moving forward with Scream 8 kind of quickly. It's got to be another Sidney story, because any other branches that they opened up, they closed with the firings. So if they decide to skip Sidney again and go and try to open up a new branch somehow, it's just going to feel like, okay, what have you been doing since 5 here? Like, you're just running in circles.
You almost kind of feel like it's going to lean into, if you really wanted to push it forward, you can lean more into the daughter now that she's gone through kind of the traumatic experience as well. And you kind of have that younger reboot who is still Sidney adjacent, and there are things that happen to the daughter, obviously, because she's the one that gets hunted most of the time to try to get to Sidney. Like, you could have some of the fallout from that be motivation for other killers in future movies. Like, there's other characters you could play with that have the motivation to become a Ghostface killer at this point or be the center of the story. And I think Sidney's daughter could be the focus once she goes off to college, and you can kind of give that soft reboot around the same timeline with Sidney's daughter, and Sidney could kind of be that sage person she goes to for advice and X, Y, and Z, and get involved if she has to. Like, if you wanted to pivot away from Sidney a little bit, you can lean into the daughter now. Like, I think that's a possibility. So we'll see what the future of the franchise leads. Like we always say, everybody keeps saying we want like these original films, but if you're going to keep showing up for these franchises time and time again, and this one, like I said, it's on track financially to be the best franchise, the best financial results for this franchise yet. Like, they're going to keep making them, guys, and they're going to keep doing it. So we'll see where the story goes from here. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see if they make the eighth one, where they're going to go with it and who they're going to focus on. That's what I would do personally, lean into the daughter now. Like, you can keep the Prescott / Evans because it's so, we know her as Sidney Prescott all along, but all of a sudden she's Sidney Evans in this film because she's married now. Like, she's got the new name and everything. But you know, it'll be really interesting to see how they progress forward with this if they do decide to pivot away from Sidney again, and we'll see what they do.
The sad thing is, I don't think it's a terrible entry in the Scream franchise, but I left the theater that the most enjoyment I got out of this film was the Scary Movie 6 trailer that played before it. Because that looked hysterical and awesome. And that's kind of sad to say, like, because I felt like in the first half they had me and it was going pretty well. Yeah. But as soon as the TV station stuff hit throughout the ending, I felt like it just kind of, they didn't know what to do, so they just threw whatever out there and ended it. And that left me with kind of a bad taste in my mouth that it could have, that if they could have ended it better, it would have been one of the better entries in the franchise if they could have just stuck the landing, but they messed up the landing really badly over it to where I was still just thinking, man, Scary Movie 6 is going to be really funny and that's going to be really good and I can't wait to see it.
That trailer was absolutely fantastic. That's going to be a ton of fun. It's doing what a lot of comedy is intended to do. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable and poke fun at things that you shouldn't be poking fun at. And it's kind of, you know,
that's a lot of comedy we haven't had in a while because they're too scared to go in those areas that might offend people. Yeah. There's going to be people offended from this, but there were some huge laughs in our theater.
Yeah, everybody was cackling at the trailer. I can't wait for that to probably drop when this episode drops because I believe, you know, we're putting this episode out on Monday, and I believe the trailer's supposed to come on Monday or Tuesday.
Because Marlon Wayans bootlegged his own trailer. He went to a theater, recorded, and put it out online.
I love that. I love that so much. That movie's gonna make a ton of money as well. That's gonna be a lot of fun too. But yeah, I mean, we got to go to the fan event screening of it, which was like the first screening, so they had a little bit of extra stuff in it. Like there were some interviews with some of the characters, like some of the actors before the film. We got the Ice Nine Kills music video with McKenna Grace, which, by the way, McKenna Grace,
I'm waiting for her rock album.
Like, put out a rock album. She sounded good on it. Like, that was fun. And
it's also a really fun music video. They do a lot of interesting stuff with the Ghostface killer in it.
Yeah, really cool theme. But Ice Nine Kills are big horror fans, obviously. Spencer does a ton of conventions and things like that. And a lot of their albums are horror-focused, horror-themed, and if you know anything about the history of that band, you know that's a big part of their, I don't want to call it a gimmick, but it's just a big part of their artistry is the horror element, and going and seeing their shows is a fantastic time, and I recommend going and seeing it if you're into that type of, you know, heavy hard rock music. That they definitely incorporate the horror elements into their live show, and it's a ton of fun and just a great band to go see live.
Yeah, but for Scream 7, it was a bit of a disappointment. It had us in the first half that it had a good cold opening. It set up some interesting story points of bringing deep faking and AI into the franchise here, but it really fell off at the midway point. It had I would almost call it a terrible ending. Like the reveals at the end really didn't matter to the story that much. You had some ridiculous over-the-top stuff that didn't fit very well into it. It could have been one of the better entries in the franchise if they really could have got that second half right. But to me, it failed in a lot of areas. I'm giving it a 6. I just feel like it could have been good, but it felt a little bit lazy and rushed in many parts of it. And that ending just really, for a franchise that's been good overall, for solid endings with a lot of connections, this ending was nothing like that at all. It had real no connection. It just did not land at all for me.
Yeah, I'm going to be a little more forgiving than you in this one because I really enjoyed it up until that final act. Up until the reveal, I actually was really into the movie. And then we got to the reveal, and you're just like, yeah, okay, that's kind of a bummer. That's a little bit of a letdown. I'm going to give it a 7. I got a lot of enjoyment out of this. They do have some very fun, creative kills. You get a lot of the meta that is the Scream franchise. It's very much a horror film that knows it's a horror film and kind of pokes fun at the fact that it's a horror film, which is always a lot of fun. In that case, some really interesting kills like they always do. A lot more focus on the Ghostface killer character in this one, which was a lot of fun because you have a lot more of that dread and that, stalking and, just a lot of those elements that I really like from the Ghostface character lean into it. It does get a little over the top with just how hard it is to kill almost anybody in this franchise. To get him, Ghostface is notwithstanding, because there was one, and I want to mention this really quick. There was a moment in there where they shot the final Ghostface like 4 or 5 times in the body, and literally they look at each other and they both say, "You gotta shoot for the head," and they immediately cut back and the Ghostface is gone after being shot like 10 times, and I'm just like, I lost it at that point. I was cackling at that because I'm just like, okay, that is dumb. That is absurd. Like, you just took 10 practically point blank shots to the body and you're not physically you're not even on the ground at that point. I'm just like, okay, that is like Scarface levels of absurdity for catching bullets at that point. But that's what I mean about like a very weak final act that kind of drug down what was up until that point for me a very enjoyable movie. Like I was getting a lot of enjoyment out of the first 2/3, 3/4 of the film, but once you got to that final act, I think it kind of didn't hit the way I'd hoped it would, and for that reason, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Like I got a lot of enjoyment out of it, but a very, very weak final act for this film that has me really wondering where they're going to go moving forward for this now, because I really don't know where they're going to go. Are they going to stay focused on Sidney? Are they going to pivot to the daughter? What Scream 8 is going to look like? And time will tell. We'll see what they do with it.
Yeah, some of the kills you said were just ridiculous between stabbing or shooting and stuff. It was almost scary movie, hot shots, Naked Gun type of level of slapstick comedy almost, and just how many like, all right, I'm going to stab you 14 times, leave you to bleed out for 6-7 hours, but you'll be okay.
You'll be okay.
Or we'll shoot you a bunch of times, but you'll be okay and then the final shootout of it was like, after one, the body would have fallen, but you're sitting there of just like, and again, it's like scary movie where you're shooting them over and over and over and over and over again in the head, and they're just not falling down. Like they can still keep their body up and everything else. And again, it's just some spoilers to get into. We're not saying who it is, but it was just ridiculous that we had to touch on that. But I figured we might be a little different. Like I love the Scream franchise. I've had such a fun with it over the years, but after 5, it feels like because of controversy of them firing people because of their beliefs, and we're not going to get on the sides of the beliefs or anything. We're trying to be objective as movie reviewers. We're focusing on the movie and not the external stuff with that. But you got to look at the studio of just not knowing kind of what they're doing because, well, we don't want to pay Nev, so we've got to go in a new direction. When now we don't like what they said, so now we got to go back to the old direction. Scream 8, what's going to happen? Is with how well it's doing, is Nev going to ask for even more money? And are they going to say like, well, no, we don't want to pay, and then they have to shift again? It's just like, plus it's also with Paramount, which if you haven't looked in the news, they are now the ones who are going to buy Warner Brothers, but apparently have to cut like $4.4 billion of the budget once this finally closes, which could be a year or 2 more. You don't really know how long it's going to take depending on all the checks, but what happens with it there? Well, the new owners feel, which, I mean, Paramount owns Scream already, but will they feel that Scream is still a viable enough franchise 30 years later? Even like it's made $60 million based off of think it was like a $45 million budget or something like that. I forget the exact moment, but do they feel there's enough profitability to keep that going after everything? Or could it be something that's cut on the wayside and this could be the final Scream? You just don't really know. Like, there's going to be franchises, there's going to be actors, directors, studios, everything that's going to be chopped and fall to the wayside because of this merger.
Yeah, time's going to tell. There's a lot of uncertainty in the industry right now, and this is unfortunately one of those that could be a victim of, merging and other things like that. But for the moment, Scream 7 is in theaters now. Go check it out. Come to our social medias. Let us know what you think about it. And it's definitely one that's got a lot of people talking right, wrong, or indifferent. And we'll see what you think about it. Come let us know.
And so thank you so much for tuning in. If you feel so inclined, do all the things that help us out, from follows, shares, likes, and comments on social media to subscribing on YouTube and your favorite audio platforms. All of it helps us out so much. We can't thank you enough for your support.
You can also become a member of our Patreon over at patreon.com/we'llbringthepopcorn. You get early access to episodes. You get exclusive merch items. You can also have your name read by us at the end of the episode. That is patreon.com/we'llbringthepopcorn. Go check it out.
That's going to do it for this episode. We'll see you on the next one.